was searching for a pet online right after I finished undergrad. His name popped up and it just was meant to be. And just looking into his eyes right away, I knew that was my dog. And that was when I was in my mid-20s. And I had him for a little over 12 years. He was about 18 months old when I first adopted him. So I had him most of his life, but I did not have him as a puppy or when he was younger. And then he passed away just a little over a year ago in March of 2023 of heart disease, which is very common, I now know, with older dogs. I can say that I'm very grateful I had an extended warning and was able to go through the process of anticipatory grief and quote, prepare, quote, not that you can really prepare because it was still very traumatic and felt very sudden in the end, in the last week of his life. But I have met so many people who've lost their pets much more suddenly. And I just feel so grateful that I had a different experience. And I did end up choosing euthanasia in the home through a service. So that was the best route for us. It was very comfortable, as comfortable as it could have been.
I've lost pets both kind of sudden and not sudden, but still kind of sudden. And what actually we didn't get to do kind of in-home euthanasia, which is what we wanted to do for the one that was like kind of sudden, but not sudden. She ended up like having basically her immune system was attacking itself. And so they were like, you have like, they kind of said like, you need to do it like now, like put her down. And my fiance was like away at the time and it was just like not possible. I was like, well, I can't put her down while he's not here. And she's, okay enough that like, I can't do that to him. And she's not like, struggling that much or in, pain that much. And she actually ended up living like another week or two. And I believe she stayed like fighting for him. And even to the point where like he went away, he was not doing well and he went away and he kind of knew like when he came back, we were going to have to put her down. And as soon as she wasn't walking at all. And as soon as I came home from dropping her off dropping Nate off at the airport, she was walking. She like started walking and I was like, this bitch knows she's got to show signs of life. Otherwise like it's not going to be good. And so I like sent Nate the photo and I was like, oh my God, she's walking. Like suddenly she's walking. It's been a week, like barely walking. But I feel like, like our pets know. And then in turn, we kind of know when it's, their time is coming. But we didn't get to we ended up having to take her to the animal hospital, which is right down the street. And they, I have to say, did an amazing job in that situation, like, telling us everything that was going to happen. And I kind of understand that the at-home euthanasia kind of does similar things, like talking you through the process and things like that.
Well, first, I'm sorry that you had to do it that way, but I'm so glad you had that extra week or so. It is really interesting to me how confusing the last week or two is when you are in that situation. My dog, I always thought, I sought a lot of advice from anyone I could ask advice from. In my neighborhood, we were always in the park every day and we had a lot of neighbors that we knew and I would ask them, but his heart disease was such that his lungs were slowly filling up with fluid over the course of about 9 or 10 months. Prior, I had gotten a diagnosis and there is a medication to help with that, but eventually the medication just cannot sustain the situation. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I also experienced a difficult vet situation in the end. They did end up pressuring me to do it immediately and do it there, even though I had always been in very constant communication with them about my plans and how it would go. And unfortunately, I still actually have an email draft I'd like to send to them of how disappointed I was with the way they treated me personally in the end after having gone to this vet for years and years. And I really actually loved them and trusted them up until that last week. They ended up doing a minor kind of invasive operation to release some fluid, and I thought it would really help him, but unfortunately it's what actually killed him.
No.
But we were able to come home, but it just made him unable to walk and unable to do anything at that point. So once he was bedridden, I knew what was happening. I was a mess, don't get me wrong, and I had thankfully like my village of people were ready and surrounded me. And then the service I use, which is Laps of Love, I highly recommend it. They offer tons of services for pre and post grief. And anyway, we found a doctor that came highly recommended, and he was, wonderful, as upset as I was that what was happening. But anyway, one of our therapists we work with in the support group says really often that she's convinced that veterinarians aren't necessarily trained in how to appropriately speak to us or even communicate their opinion. But there's a lot of pressure to euthanize your animal, your pet. And it's very confusing for the mind when you're going through the trauma and the grief of making those huge decisions. And I just wish there was a lot more compassion, because I don't think there's a right or wrong. And I certainly don't need a medical professional telling me, well, one of them told me that I was being selfish and unsolicited, like gave me some horrible words of what she thought I was doing and how my dog would suffer if I didn't bring him in that day. And I was planning to euthanize him anyway within like 2 days. It wasn't like I needed to be convinced.
That's not helpful.
No, it really wasn't. And anyway, not to harp on that for too long, most of my experience were actually quite positive, but that is one that I wish they could have helped me more. And they also didn't give me any grief resources. I asked them about, do you know a place I could bury him? Do you know any groups? Like, they had absolutely no advice for me. I had to seek that out on my own and with my friends. And thankfully I was able to find those resources, but
it's good to bring it up.
Yeah, it is very good. And honestly, like, the other 11 months there are in the year, we focus on people grief. And honestly, we talk a lot about how, doctors really don't have that bedside manner. They're so brilliant in so many ways. And that is like one thing that like they just don't, not every, and there are certainly some that do. So I don't want to like generalize. I've had some great doctors and I've had some not so great doctors. And actually in my kind of experience with our vet, I kind of like even like months before in like their annual checkups, like I had like a disagreement with them because they basically like, there was something about billing. And I just was like, listen, I am never going to like not spend as much money as I can to like keep these dogs healthy and alive. But the way in which your team of people, because it wasn't just one person, like explained things to me, it sounded as if it was going to be this price. And then it was like this price, which was dramatically different and not something as easy for anyone to pay out of pocket, like day of, And in that case, I was actually advocating for my animal to come in to get seen. And they were like, no, she's probably fine. And I'm like, listen, this boy on her head literally smells like my entire house up. Like, I promise you, she needs to be seen. So, and in those, like, I think that actually carried through because I had like a very straightforward conversation. Like, I was like, I just need you to explain it to me. Like, we're 5 years old, because when you speak all these like terms, I don't know what you're saying and I can't make an informed decision. And it kind of came down to like when they said to, she kept saying things like, I can't tell you to put her down, or so like, I can't tell you to euthanize her. And it was like, okay, yes, I maybe legally can't say euthanize her today or whatever it is. But like, I'm looking to you as the expert to like help me figure out which decision I should make, like the best decision for my animals. So it is like, so I understand that. I'm sure if we had a vet on, they'd be like, there's so many legal things that we can and cannot do. But it's like in those moments, like we are literally heartbroken. Like, or not, like, I don't even know if that begins to describe. So it's really hard for like that experience to be just like made more traumatic by the experience, like by the vet themselves.
It's interesting because my experience with the hospice care with Ariana was so much worse than the experience I had with our vet when we had to put our dog down. So like hearing your guys' experience is interesting because our vet was so good because it came out of nowhere. He had liver
Yeah.
cancer, brought him in on a Friday, and they called me like 2-3 hours later, and he was just so kind, and he's like, this is probably what it is. We could do this, we could do that. Let's think about what's best for the dog and for his life.
That's amazing.
And it was the same thing, like how Nate wasn't there. My youngest wasn't here. And I was like, well, I need to make sure my youngest can say goodbye. And he was like, absolutely. And he was like, here's what to look for. Call us every day. Give us updates. Let us know what's going on. And I did. But it's like, I was confronted with that decision of like, how do you know when?
Right.
Yeah.
Even like watching for the signs, you still don't necessarily know. Like it was so more humane to me than what I experienced in hospice with my wife. It was bizarre, actually.
Yeah. I feel like it's just down to the doctor,
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you had a different experience. And my vet was honestly great up until that last minute. She offered to be on call. She said, I'll make sure, get in touch with my cell phone. And she basically ghosted me and called me about a week after he died and left a voicemail and said, I just wanted to give you some space. I know, you probably made a decision by now. I'm like, I left like 3 messages for you. I didn't want space. I needed you. You said you would be there for me.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like just because we live in a capitalist society, I think a lot of the things that they might say to us are driven by financial gain. At least that's what I experienced. I could tell they wanted me to spend all the rest of the money there with euthanasia and cremation. And they were annoyed. I think that they seemed, I could be misinterpreting, but they seemed annoyed with me that I was choosing to instead do in-home euthanasia and then burial.
That's sad. That's a horrible experience.
Yeah, that is really, I'm so sorry. I honestly like my vet recommended Laps of Love. Like they were like a lot of our clients love, they highly recommend. Cause I actually said, my fiance really wants to do in-home euthanasia. Like we just, we don't want her to be in the vet. Although Lily did come to enjoy that vet office quite a bit.
Oh, wow.
So in the end, we like actually walking in there, bringing her in there, like they all knew her, honestly, so many of them, because we had been there so much in her final like few weeks and months. So it ended up being like very good for her. I don't know that we would repeat it for like our other dogs that we have. God forbid that day must come. But like they recommended Laps of Love. Like they were like, a lot of people like this and, they do this, or they, here's another service, but here's the downside, here's the upside. So I have to say, talking through those options, like they were really very, very helpful with that. And even when we were there that day, like they didn't even care about getting our payment. They were like, just, go home. We'll call you in a few days. And so I think it's like it's so down to like the vet and like the clinic itself. I know that you don't want to like dwell on that too much. So I'm curious to ask more about how that impacted like your grief journey and processing, the grief. Like you had that on top of having to make the decision and then, kind of processing it from there.
Right. Well, I should say I live alone. I'm single. I've been single for a long time and I don't have children. So my dog was my whole world. He was my routine, my best friend, my partner in all things. And that made the experience of losing him a little bit different, I think. And I know there's a lot of not just millennial women, but a lot of people in that situation. Statistically, we're marrying or partnering up with people later and later in life and choosing to have children later and later in life. And so I think a lot of millennials got dogs, in their 20s, and I feel like we're all kind of starting to go through this in our mid to late 30s, since dogs only live about 10 to 15 years. And my dog had just turned 14 when he passed. So I'm lucky he lived that long. But yeah, I really couldn't have gone through it without my friends. Everybody really pulled through for me, which was probably the most beautiful thing that I experienced through every moment of tragedy and heartbreak. When I realized he was going to be passing, everyone came through to visit with us. I was never alone. There was always somebody here sitting with us and petting him and talking to me, or even distracting me. I needed to be distracted at times. I had 2 friends staying here with me overnight. One of them basically making sure I was eating and drinking water, because I was so anxious and nauseous and sleep deprived that I could barely function. In fact, I guess I should say too, his illness was such that we did not sleep for those 9 months, really. We only slept in like 1 to 2 hour increments.
Oh.
So it was a really hard almost a year of me experiencing what it's like to live that way. I would assume it's kind of like what it would be like to have a newborn baby, just up a lot. His heart disease made him cough and choke. And so that would wake him up. That would wake me up. And he would often need his prescription. So anyway, it was just a really stressful time, and I really needed rest. And my friends helped me just with all the ugly things that happened in the end, just constantly needing to change the sheets, do laundry. And then when Slaps of Love came through, dealing with like a transportation service we found, I'm just so grateful I didn't have to witness or do anything more than I could handle. My friends really took care of that stuff for me and made sure that I survived, because I was so concerned. I could not really remember life without him. I was in college, like in a dorm, like that's so another lifetime to me. And so I wasn't sure how I could possibly get through even the first day, the first week, the first month, which I can say in hindsight, that was the hardest. The first month is really the hardest. And it slowly, I felt a little bit more stabilized, not better, but stabilized. At first I couldn't sleep in our bedroom where everything happened. So, and nobody judged me. A friend came over and helped me pull a mattress into the living room. And I slept in the living room for about 6 weeks with the TV on, which is not something I'd ever done before. Yeah, but that was how I had to comfort myself. I also like kept my Christmas tree up, even though it was March, and all the lights, all the Christmas lights and decorations, which I normally wouldn't do, but I needed every little comfort to just feel a little bit better. I've always kind of been very prideful about how independent I am. I've been on my own
I feel that.
I've been on my own for a really long time. I don't have like a relationship with my biological family. So I really learned that I thought I knew how to be alone. But once Smitty passed, I was like, oh crap, I'm like really alone now. And I was not prepared for it. That was the one thing I really didn't anticipate, like feeling nervous at nighttime for my safety. I don't live in like a particularly dangerous area of my city, but if I hear a noise, I'll still like call one of my friends, like, I just heard a scary noise, or like, I have like a hammer under my bed. Like I didn't realize how much I trusted my dog to completely take care of the security side of my life, because he would bark, he could smell anything, he would let me know anything going on outside. And I knew people would, even though he did not look like a dog to be afraid of. I should show you a picture. Actually, I have a painting of him.
Yes.
Aww.
Oh my gosh.
I did not paint that. I should say I am not talented in that way, but
for those listening, it was a very photorealistic, but also stylized.
So good.
Yeah, sorry, the visual doesn't really translate to podcast. Rather,
that's okay.
It's okay. We'll share it when we share your episode.
Great. Oh, cool.
You can send us a photo.
I will. So I should describe him. He was so cool. He was a really short, stocky pit bull mix. He had reddish orange hair with a white tummy and white paws. And everybody loved him. He was just the best. He was so friendly, so extroverted. He would pull me into any social situation. Even we'd be walking down the street or walking through the park, and if 2 or more were gathered, he was like, oh, we're invited to that. And I'd be a little embarrassed sometimes or not in the mood. He like jumped in someone's hammock once trying to just really be a part of whatever they were doing in the hammock. And he would get people to give him steaks from a barbecue. Like he was just the most beautiful, friendly, loving guy. I loved taking him everywhere with me. So I knew a huge part of my loss would be just feeling immensely lonely, not just in my house, but when I would go out. Usually I would take him with me to my errands, to restaurant, especially when it was warmer. We could sit in the patio.
What were some of the things that you did in your grief? I mean, you mentioned a few things like the comforts, but what is some of the tools or the tactics that you used as you have like navigated through your grief, which is still very early on, but yeah.
Thank you for asking me that. I can say that I'm notoriously really hard on myself in life, and I let this be an opportunity where I, truly the first time in my life, gave myself full permission to not say, whatever. I told myself, you have a year to just fall apart. There is no pressure. There will be no negative self-talk.
Wow.
Yeah.
There will be nothing. And that gave me so much freedom and space to just go through my emotions. And I also, because I feel like I had to build a new identity, because my identity so much was dog mom, and Smitty really made me cool. I felt like he made me cool. Like I felt so responsible, and obviously a lot of my maternal energy that since I don't have children, I could put that through him. My nurturing skills were really used in that way, and not being able to use those anymore. I started investing those into just visiting his gravesite. Honestly, I went as often, I still do. I go as often as I possibly can, make sure it looks really, really nice. I journal every time I'm there. I write him a letter. I keep the letter. I started going to the support group. I went to a couple of individual therapist sessions with Laps of Love, which were affordable, but they did cost money. But then I found out that the support groups with about 20 people were free, which is incredible. So I started going to that once a week very diligently. And that has honestly been just the best possible support, really. It's just the commiseration with people at different stages of the loss. There's people who are a few days out, and there's people it's been 2 years, and there's no judgment, and you don't have to share. You could share if you want to. And the facilitator is incredible, giving us a lot of resources, books to read, ways to journal, things to meditate on. I had no idea that any of this existed when my dog got sick. And I'm just so grateful that I've been able to be carried through it with these things. But yeah, it really did start with me giving myself permission to sleep on the living room floor, to eat whatever I wanted to eat, to go wherever I wanted to go or not go somewhere. But I was also I should say too, I was conscientious about the pitfalls. I've seen people in my family growing up deal with grief in a destructive way. And so I knew what to avoid. So I made sure, like, I don't really have alcohol in the house. Not that I'm a big drinker to begin with. I'm really not at all. But I just wanted to make sure I was not falling into substance use as a coping skill. And I was careful about a few different things, but that was the main thing I was careful about during those early days.
So what I take away from everything you said is you essentially gave yourself permission to feel, and whatever that brought on and looked like, you were okay with.
Right. And I was worried before he died. I knew that there was a stigma with pet loss. I've seen other people go through it, and I knew people would understand. Well, I know people say the worst things when you lose a child, a spouse. So I could only imagine the things people were going to say to me when it was just a dog, Yeah. Thankfully, 99% of people have said very helpful things to me. And it's just that 1% who have said very unhelpful things to me. The main thing is, so when are you going to get another dog? Are you going to get a dog yet? say you wouldn't tell someone who lost a child to go get pregnant or adopt a child. Like that's not how it works. Maybe for some people, but not for me. I need a big break from this type of parenthood, if you could call it that. I don't even know if it's offensive to call it that. I actually do feel a little bit like I walk on eggshells even talking about any of this, because I don't want to offend anyone who's lost a person. That is totally, I do acknowledge it's completely different.
Yeah, but it's still the companionship. Like the New York Times wrote about this like really well, I feel like, in some recent articles around pet grief, is that we think, because it's like, oh, just a dog, but they have like, they provide unconditional love. Like there's so many things that are, it's not a person, but there's so many things that are like the reason why it hurts so bad when we lose a person that is there with your dog. Yeah. And maybe we only expect them to live 10 to 15 years. And, you know, our children are supposed to grow up and we're supposed to die first. And like, I think that's a big thing with obviously losing, like we've had plenty of parents on that have lost their children and vice versa. And I cannot even begin to imagine that, because, you know, we're supposed to bury our parents,
right?
You know, like, but I think that like, that's the thing that like really has to change, because not everyone, you know, well, the world is changing. Like not everyone gets married and has kids, and like, that's just different. You know, it's like the world looks different now. And some people are dog moms and dads. And like, that is still a thing. Let's just put them all as things that we're keeping alive, and we're giving love and they're giving love. And so it's like, it can't be compared.
Thank you for saying that.
Comparison is probably one of the most destructive things with grief. And I mean, people, I can't even say it. I'm sorry. You lost your wife. I can't compare it. It's like, I'm not asking you to. Right. Yeah. Like we had the last pet grief that we interviewed, like as the woman was describing her experience, I was just like, yeah, that's the exact experience that I had losing my wife. So because we can't understand something doesn't mean that we should demonize it or lessen it or make judgments on it. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do here is be like, listen, like we've had people, like Ashley said, who've had child loss, who've had parental loss, who have lost their spouses, their cousins, their brothers, their pets. And you can, like, each of us have our unique experience, but you can see this thread of grief that runs through it and the thread of that experience. And I think that's what like needs to be highlighted, that this is real. It's not fake. It's not manufactured. And because it was 10 years versus 30, I mean, what does that matter? Some people get engaged and lose their spouse and they're only together for a year and it's horrific. Like, you know, time is not, time should not factor into grief in both sides of it, and how long you had the person or the pet or the thing that you're grieving, and the time that it takes to build the healing around it, because it will never go away.
I really appreciate everything you just said. And that's a huge lesson I think I've gained in the last year and a half, is just having way less judgment or bias about any of these things. And again, learning how to give myself compassion kind of for the first time in my life. I have not been good at it, but my brain, the brain doesn't really know the difference. In my brain, I lost what it was essentially my child / partner. And that just, it ruined my life. I mean, it really did. When I would come home from work that first few months, like I couldn't even walk in the door without just bending over sobbing. I couldn't walk up the stairs. I live on a second floor and I like could not walk up the stairs. I had to completely collapse once the door was closed, regain my composure, and then walk up the stairs. And I think it's because I knew he wasn't going to be up there to greet me like I was so used to for 12 years. Although thankfully, oh my gosh, some of my coworkers, they're so kind. They pitched in and got me this beautiful big portrait of him that I put So when I
Aw.
open the door, it's there. So he is greeting me in a way now. That was really helpful. It's been really helpful.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. I'm so grateful for them. I'm just so lucky so many people have been understanding to me. But yeah, my brain really didn't know the difference. And I should say too, I actually haven't experienced a lot of loss in my life. And I am very privileged for that. I lost my grandparents and that's about it. And other dogs, childhood dogs. So my experience with grief, I always said I felt like a baby in grief. I like don't know anything about grief. I'm learning about grief as I go and I want to learn about it. And
well, I feel like you're doing an amazing job.
oh, thank you.
Learning about it and
I do, seriously. I'm like sitting here thinking, I'm like, God damn, she's got this shit like doing all the right things and avoiding the numbing and the substances, because that is very common and understandably so. Like no judgment on people, but like it is common. It makes sense, right? Like we want to numb that because it's so overwhelming.
Oh,
yeah. But then you lose the ability to feel and you delay because you will eventually have to reconcile your grief.
There was a quote in one of the books I have, and I would love to share these resources with people. I can give you the titles later, but one of them says two things. One is that I've highlighted and read over and over. This is a job. Grief is kind of like a job. It's work or mourning. I should say more of the mourning. The mourning is work and you have to commit to that. And I did take that very seriously. And most of that, again, is me usually actually visiting the cemetery and spending time with my dog. It's actually about 15 miles away from me. So that was the closest one that we could find at the time. So taking the time to go there, even though it takes up most of my day when I do it. I live in a big city, so going out to the burbs is not like a quick task. Yeah. It's pretty much a whole day thing. So yeah, committing myself to that. And also just looking at it like a wound. If I broke my leg, I'd get a cast. If I got in a car accident, I would go to physical therapy. I might even go to talk therapy. I might have trauma. Like this is the same thing. I have to take care of myself and show up for myself. But at the same time, I mean, I haven't like necessarily, I wouldn't say I've done it perfectly. There is no perfect, but there have been days where I probably over isolated for longer periods of time. I have actually had a really hard time keeping my house in order. I am a very clean person and normally very organized. And I should be very honest. The thing I've struggled with the most is maintaining my level of organization and cleanliness. I think the depression of grief has really I've gone through a lot of chronic fatigue. So when I am home, I just want to lay there, scroll on my phone, do the bare minimum of things that need to get done. And I'm still, even now, like I'm listening to an audiobook about feng shui and like getting my shit together in my house. Like I have got to get this house in order. And it's hard. I don't want to get rid of any of my dog's stuff either. I know a lot of people do that. I am not doing that. I've given away a few of his toys, but to a friend who actually, this is crazy. My best friend got a dog the day that my dog died. And we always thought that we would have dogs at the same time and they would be friends, but it just didn't work out that way. But it's also been really interesting that the moment my dog died, I got to become kind of like an aunt to this other dog.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to have that in my life and have that outlet. And once in a while, I'll take care of him and take him for a walk. So that's been really helpful too. I've dog sat for a few people actually, which is helpful, but I gotta say, I miss my old life. I used to be very nature oriented, always on a walk with my dog every night. And that's something I want to keep working on, is making sure I get outside and go for a walk every night, just because it's hard. I feel like I need to have a leash in my hand. Like I have nothing to do with my hands. That feels really awful to just have empty hands. And if I also went through that thing, I'm sure people maybe can relate to. I was very pissed off the first few months seeing other people's dogs. I was like, you're going to die. You're going to die. You're going to die. Like it was more like, I hate that all these dogs are going to pass away eventually. I hate that this dog has outlived my dog. I hate that tree in the park outlived my dog. I hate that I've outlived my dog. Cause kind of speaking that order of natural order of things, I didn't want to go first, but I guess I hoped we would die like the couple in The Notebook with their hands held in the hospital together. That would have been what I preferred, was to just go at the same time. But the universe has other plans for me, I guess. But
yeah, that's the identity piece, and the finding the things that you enjoy is definitely a common experience in grief. I like immediately lost my identity. I mean, I was with my wife since we were 18.
Oh, wow.
She died at 35, and I was just like, well, who am I now? Right? Like it was always Ariana and CJ, and then I was like, and what do I enjoy? Did I enjoy it because I was doing it with her? And I think that's like a very common experience where you have to like rediscover who you are. And then if it is the thing that you enjoy that you did with your person or your pet, like how do you find the joy in that again when you're in the midst of missing them? We had 2 dogs. The first one passed away last year, but they were very much my wife's dogs. And I was trying to convince myself that they would keep her alive long enough, but they didn't. But we do have an agreement with the cemetery. So she was cremated, but we did a green burial. So they took her remains into a biodegradable bag, and we have a rock for her gravestone. But I will be allowed to bury the dogs with her, their remains. So I'm like, it's so beautiful because they'll return back to her. So you said you were talking cemetery, and that just like triggered in my mind.
I love that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I feel like you did say that at the funeral of CJ, but I can't remember, or I didn't remember it. I think on the identity thing, as it relates to losing our pet, I don't know. I feel like this might even be similar to like how you kind of like a lot of parents when they lose a spouse talk about how like their kids really keep them going. And I feel like my other dogs kept us going. Like we actually had 3 at the time. And then Lily passed. And we have 2 now, Lady and Molly. And they all were amazing dogs. And so I think that like, I didn't have so much as like, oh, like who's to take on a walk anymore, because I still had 2 dogs to take on a walk. But now I could kind of do it myself, like, because it was very hard to take 3 dogs on.
I bet. Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot of bags too. That's a lot.
Yeah, wow. Exactly. Like, so like that, like I didn't have as much of that, but I definitely had like when I came home and was like, like Lily would always, she was like deaf towards the end, so she would never get up and come to the door. So you always found her like in some place, and she would just be like, oh, you're home. And, like, so it would just be like, where's Lily going to be? And sometimes, she could barely even like lift her front legs up. But like there would be like every like 12 times we'd leave, she'd somehow end up on our bed. And we'd be like, how did you get up there? Like, how did you jump on the bed? But that was like those little things, like when you said, coming home, it's like that was like the hardest part for me, is like, oh my God, like this dog's not going to be there when I get home to greet you. And, she obviously was not protecting the house from anyone, but no one knew that she was, like couldn't necessarily jump. Like they were just in the window and they look scary as hell. So no one's messing with the house.
You've reminded me of a couple things. One, another way I've been grieving is because my house feels so empty now. I talk to my dog or just talk out loud. Mm-hmm. I mean, no one's going to hear me, so I can get away with it. And I will say, I miss you, Smitty, or I'll talk in my silly voice to him, or I'll just say, I hate this. I say that a lot, actually. I have to get that negativity out because the toxicity will just build inside. So I just, as soon as I feel that word, I say it out. I'm like, I hate this. I'll even say something extreme. Like, I hate my life now. I don't think it'll ever get better. I think I already peaked. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I peaked with him. That was the height of me feeling happy, looking cool, having a great life. And it's all downhill from here. I know that's not true. And I hope that's not true. But because I'm a person who does struggle with depression and anxiety, I could go into that dark place in my mind. And I just say it, spit it out, say it out loud. And even though I didn't have another dog, I wish I could have had 2 dogs at a time, but I just couldn't afford it. And I don't know if Smitty would have appreciated it, sharing me with someone. But because I
just had annual visits, so I get it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right. Because I'm a teacher, I love kids and I love my job. And those kids absolutely got me through the last year. They wrote me the most beautiful, well-spoken cards when my dog passed. I should have gotten them out so I could have read them too. I mean, it just blew my mind how they know exactly what to say and it's never offensive. It is the thing that I need to hear. And they're 8, they're 9, they're 10, 11. And they would draw me pictures of him and they still bring him up. And we celebrated Dia de los Muertos in October. And I got to put my dog's picture on the altar. And everybody knows who he is at school. And so getting to grieve even at work is a huge privilege. And those kids really got me through it. And they understand. They've lost pets too, even though some of it might be a goldfish. But they're like, I had lost my goldfish. So they want to talk about it. They relate as well. And that's been a huge lifesaver for me.
I mean, I think that you should give yourself a little bit more credit. I mean, I think it's amazing that your friends and your coworkers were are there for you, but they couldn't be there if you didn't express how much Smitty meant to you, and you didn't express, how much you were hurting, or how difficult it was, and also just probably telling them how they could help you, because sometimes in these situations, we don't really know what to do. Even experiencing it, even talking about it on here. Our neighbor just lost her husband, and she just wasn't ready to have drinks. We scheduled drinks and she canceled. Totally understandable. And I said to my other neighbors, I was like, we can't stop inviting her, because that's kind of what happens is you think, because they say no once, you don't want. So I think it's a lot to you that you were communicative and saying, this is what I need and this is how I'm feeling and this is what can help me feel better. And, I'm sure that you're a very good friend and that's why they showed up for you. But, we have to do that too. In giving ourselves grace, we've got to communicate how we want to be helped in order for people to really feel like they can help us too.
Right. Thankfully, one thing I have is absolutely no social shame to an extent. So I was very adamant and intentional about posting on Instagram or telling friends in real life, please check on me, invite me to stuff. I might not say yes, but keep inviting me to stuff. And I did make myself say yes way more often than I ever felt like it. I did a lot of new things that I normally wouldn't do, but I did ask for help. And you just reminded me, another really cool thing that I've learned in my grief journey is how my friends and acquaintances and coworkers, neighbors have different skill sets that have been helpful to me at different times. Some people were so good at being there for me when my dog was still alive and was sick. And a lot of those people aren't in my life anymore, not very much. And then the people that I felt really failed me during that time showed up. I mean, so many people showed up when he died. It was shocking. And instead of being resentful or annoyed by those facts, it's some people are really good at certain things at certain times. And I'll take whatever I can get because I'm desperate and I need friendship. And I hope I give back. I want to be there for people too. This has taught me also how to be there for people. I don't think I properly showed up for people in the past, at least not checking in on them as much as maybe I should have. I didn't understand grief at all. And it's a real privilege to start to grasp what it's like to go through this and ask people, okay, how do you just keep going every day? I can't believe I have to get up and keep living my life without this significant being in my life. How in the world am I supposed to just keep going? But you do. And the one it's kind of cliche, but it's been helpful to me. That phrase that your grief doesn't shrink, you just grow around it. That's rung really true for me personally. It still feels like this gaping hole in my chest, but my life, because of time, I'm still having more and more experiences and I'm aging myself. And I hope that I will just always feel like he's with me in some way. I'm not a very spiritual person. I don't really believe in dog heaven, I'm sorry to say, but I don't know. I don't know what lies beyond this world, and that's been kind of annoying to not know and not have any kind of faith in that regard. I grew up very religious, but I left that stuff in my 20s. So more of an agnostic person now. And I'm just like, well, I do understand that like energy can't just disappear. So there's something about him.
Literally the exact experience that I had.
Really?
So like grew up religious, walked away from it.
Oh, really?
And was like, I need to deconstruct everything. And the only thing I knew was energy is never destroyed. Like verbatim is what I went through. And then the past 3.5 years, I've had different experiences and people come into my life who have encouraged, different things. And then last December, I ended up going to a medium and it was very profound.
Oh, wow.
Very profound. And it kind of opened up me again to like, okay, I need to pay attention a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I've had the same thing and I was so resistant to everything.
Now I'm wondering if pet mediums are a thing.
They are. And you're reminded me that I signed up to do that and I didn't go. But
oh my God.
I wanted to do that. I should go.
Go. Just go.
If you go, you need to report back.
I will.
I've never experienced someone I've never had someone go to that. And I'd just be so curious. I just heard someone tell me about a pet psychic or something. Yeah. I don't even know. They look at a picture of your pet and they're like, he was basically it was he's a little afraid of dad and he loved I don't know. There was something they were having behavioral issues and it kind of they explained it or I don't know. It was very weird. And when two of our dogs got into a little scuffle and someone had said, oh, maybe you could do that and figure out why. And I was like, maybe they just didn't like each other that day. I don't know.
There's got to be something to it. I read an interview once with the singer actress Mandy Moore, and she's a big animal person, and she was having a lot of behavioral issues with one of her cats. And she went to a pet psychic as a total last resort. She didn't really believe in it, but the psychic said, your cat hates his name. You have to change his name. And she was like, oh my God, what? Are you serious? And she even suggested you need to name him this other name. That's what he wants to be called. And swear to God, she changed his name, started calling him that other name. No behavior issues anymore. Wow. What? That's crazy.
Okay. I feel like I'm just going to do it now just to be what do they think? Are they like, Mom, you're fucking weird. Leave us alone sometimes. We don't have separation anxiety. You have separation anxiety.
Oh my God. During COVID, during 2020, oh my gosh, I drove my dog crazy. I was so up in his business and he would jump off the couch to go to another couch. Please leave me alone.
The theory of, I don't know what I believe, so I'm not professing anything, but I have come across theories of past lives. And even in past lives, so I forgot what it was. It's one soul, many lives. But in a past life, you also could be an animal. So there is those possibilities if this was true. Mm-hmm. So that's why also it stands to reason if this existed, why some people say they have soul pets, right? Because it's you don't know the relationship that you had with that soul in a past life. So I think there's some mystery around all of it.
I was a dog then.
100%. You could have been. I
was a dog in my past life. Molly is my soul animal.
Yeah. You just don't know. And I think what's been so cool about having this opening to spiritual things again is rediscovering the mystery of life. So I don't know what I believe, but I have opened myself up to the mystery and to the wonder. And that feels good to experience again, but in a way that is just open and not prescribed. You know what I mean? Religion prescribes
I love that. Yeah.
what you do, but spirituality is open. It's an open vessel to experience the supernatural, the things that we can't see or know unless you let yourself. So yeah, I would say definitely go to the pet medium, because if it's something you're not afraid of, just do it. It could end up being super healing. Even if it's not real, it could still feel amazing.
I appreciate that. advice. I'm glad to hear that you've had a positive experience too. I think I just wasn't ready. I think I signed up to do it a little too soon, but I feel more calm and open to that now. Like you said, even if in the worst case scenario, I'm comforted.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing. I try to ask my dog to come to my dreams. I dream a lot every night, very lucidly. And I've always been that way since I was a kid. And I've had just a few dreams with him, but unfortunately, usually when he's in my dreams, he is sick and dying, or I know that he's already died and I'm like desperate to like figure out what to do next. I'm just like, oh no, I have to take care of this problem. So unfortunately, the dreams are a bit stressful, but I do like petting him. I just miss petting him so much. And that's probably the thing that causes me the most like heartache is not having that physical affection with him anymore. And it's not really replaceable. Like I have his sweaters and I can hold them or his blanket, but it's not the same.
Yeah. Have you considered like volunteering like at the animal shelter or anything like that kind of as part of your journey? Because I feel like I will preface, I feel like asking that question is a little bit like, are you going to get another dog? But I mean it's in the sense of like kind of getting animal interaction, but not, like feeling like you're replacing the animal.
Right. I think that is a great option for people. I mean, you literally get serotonin, right?
Yeah.
When you pet a dog. I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere. Unfortunately, I've checked in with myself about that periodically, and I haven't felt like that's something that would maybe help. I think because I have a couple of dogs in my life, like I take this class every Saturday to learn the Irish language. And
nice.
It's a huge part of my life. And my identity. But at the Irish Center in Chicago, there's a dog in the gift shop.
Oh.
So every Saturday I hang out with that dog just for 5 minutes at the most. But I have like different dogs in different departments of my life that I get to pet or talk to. And as of right now, that's enough for me.
Yeah.
I think there is something, not very logical, but something inside that I feel like I would just rather be with my dog.
Yeah, I get it.
In fact, I dog sat for someone a little too early after the loss, and it was a great dog, but being with that dog for a few days didn't feel good. All I did was just compare that dog to my dog, or that dog didn't feel super comfortable with me. They didn't know me very well. So I felt offended that the dog didn't want to, sit next to me on the couch. And so unfortunately there's a little too many triggers, I think, but I think they're fading slowly but surely. And I would love to get another dog. I'd love to have a whole farm, actually. I'm very much an animal person. Yeah. That's the dream. Chickens and goats and horses and all kinds of things. That would be amazing. And I just know that someday I will know when it's the time for me. I'm kind of the age where I'm kind of deciding if I want to be a mother to children or if I'm going to, and how I'm going to go about that. So I think this has kind of opened up some space and time for me to consider parenthood. If that's even in the cards for me, I really don't know. And I will always appreciate and love my dog for teaching me how to be a mom in a way. I know I'm not saying it's the same thing.
No. I totally resonate with that, honestly, because before I had dogs, I didn't even think I could be a mom. And now I'm like, okay, yeah, I kind of want kids.
No way.
I was like, oh, I could do this. Like, I worry about them. I'm concerned about their safety. And sometimes I scold them.
It's really cool that they teach you like, oh, I can be responsible financially, medically, emotionally. I can do this. I can take care of someone besides myself. And the thing I've noticed in my support group is so many of us feel like we failed when you lose that pet. It's like they weren't supposed to die. I failed them.
Okay.
It's really, really hard for the brain to accept that they have a lifespan that's quite short, and that's not our fault. There's so much shoulda, coulda, woulda. Just like, don't use the word should. Don't use the word should. It is what it is, and we're just so lucky to have them for any time at all. Especially if, like you're saying, soul dog. I didn't even know the term soul dog till this all happened to me, and I did have a very very deep connection with my dog that is almost unexplainable. So yeah, I wonder about that.
Yeah, like I can't even explain it. I love other dogs, but I love Molly. Like I literally cannot even explain it. And she wasn't even my dog to begin with. It was a
Really?
Yeah, it was a family friend, and it all came around that she was just better. She would have a better life with me right now. So she is now my fiance and I's dog. We've had her for like a year and a half, full time. Yeah. And she honestly is like almost like, I don't want to say like a different dog because I've always seen like the amazing dog she was, but she did have like some behavioral things. Like she would just get snippy with some dogs that came into her house or in her territory. And she hasn't had any issues since she's been here. And people that knew her kind of in both worlds, she is a different dog. She is just so calm. And that's like not just me, that's like my fiance too, because from the moment he met her, I sort of joke that he actually fell in love with Molly and not me, but like I was just an added bonus. So like I think it's a real thing. And I don't know that I would have believed it before I had Molly, honestly.
Wow. Well, I'm so happy for you that you have her in your life.
Yeah.
So before we let you go, one last question, and that would be, what advice do you have for somebody who is going through the same thing?
If it's early days, I would say, like what I did with myself, just give yourself permission to completely fall apart. Do whatever you need to do to get through it without hurting yourself. And you will hopefully be surprised, as I was surprised, at how compassionate and generous people are, both in spirit and word, and also in just getting you food or making sure you have what you need to get through the day. Just keep being open to people and just take care of those basic needs, sleep, eat, drink, water, and shower. It's that basic, and it's okay to go back to basics for a while.
That's amazing. Yeah. We appreciate you so much sharing and coming on. And it was great to hear. Honestly, it was great to hear like everything you're doing. It's kind of like, it was awesome. And I think, like Ashley was saying earlier, how you were really showing up for yourself. And the word that kept coming to me was vulnerability. You were allowing yourself to be vulnerable, and people responded to it by showing up for you. And so thank you for being vulnerable here with us, especially with a topic that can be so stigmatized in society. And we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much, CJ. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Day After. You can find this podcast and more at our website at www.thedayafter.com. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd really appreciate if you could take a moment to leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts.